Good morning and welcome back to the channel. Today we're back at Ramsgate. However, we're going to be looking around the tunnels or Ramsgate Tunnels, and I'll give you some insight into the history behind it. So please join me as we take a look around. In 1863, this was the earliest known part of the system. It was the former mainline railway tunnel, which was opened on the 5th of October 1863 by the Kent Coast Railway, later to become the London, Chatham and Dover Railway, LC and DR. The line served the Ramsgate Harbour Station and was constructed by a consortium of companies. Peto, Betts and Crampton. Thomas Crampton resigned from the Kent Coast Railway Board of Directors to assist in the construction of the track and tunnel. It was envisaged that the line would provide a regular communication with Ostend via packet ships. In 1926, Ramsgate had two railway stations run by two different companies. The town station at the top of Chatham Street was owned by South Eastern Railway, and the Sands or Harbour Station belonged to the London, Chatham and Dover Railway. Eventually these two bitter rivals came together, and in 1926 the lines were rationalised under the name of Southern Railway. Ramsgate Town Station was rebuilt, and at its time current location, and a new line was constructed from this station to Broadstairs, joining the former London, Chatham and Dover line just to the north of the railway tunnel. A new station was built at Dumpton, and Ramsgate Sands was abandoned along with the tunnel. In 1936, Ramsgate Olympia Limited were running a successful amusement park on the former Sands railway station site. Constructed a branch tunnel linking the main tunnel with a new station in Harrison Road. A narrow gauge electric railway was used to link the Dumpton mainline station and the surrounding area with the beach and amusement at Marie, England. The line was opened on July 31st, 1936, and to complement the 5-minute railway journey, illuminated tableaux were erected in the main tunnel depicting scenes from around the world, and the railway became known as the World Scenic Railway. In 1938, Ramsgate's borough engineer Mr. R.D. Brimmel had been working on plans to construct a new underground protection system. Since 1936, Ramsgate already had a considerable amount of underground shelter on the east and west cliffs, which had been used in World War I. But with a more enlightened approach to aerial attack, it was feared by the authorities that when a raid started, the population would make a dash for these shelters and would be exposed to danger as they crossed the town. And proposed entrances in public places given access within a quarter of a mile of all but the most sparsely populated or extreme outskirts of the town. Discussions took place between the officials of the Home Office, the borough engineer and the chief constable with regard to the possibility of using certain smaller underground shelters which were made available during the last war. And arising from these decisions, council officers prepared a scheme which, if carried out, could provide extensive underground protection on a scale most likely to be adequate and effective in the circumstances. Much debate had taken place in the committee with regard to ARP shelters, and on the 2nd of June 1938 the borough engineer put his final plans for the deep shelter tunnel system before the council. In the debate that followed, many were against the scheme and felt that there were better ways to spend the town's money. After much discussion, it was agreed to defer the plan rather than dismiss it. Following Germany's occupation of Austria in 1938, the scheme was again brought before the council, and this time it was agreed to submit to the government for approval and funding. The scheme was presented to the Home Office but rejected as being premature. In February 1939, as Hitler's intentions with regard to Czechoslovakia became clearer, a third application for approval to build the air raid tunnel system was submitted to the Lord Privy Seal, and correspondence was taking place, but matters were moving very slowly. The borough's Air Raid Precautions Committee agreed to leave the further approach to the Member of Parliament in the hands of the Mayor Alderman ABC Kempe, Ramsgate's very own top hat mayor. The Member of Parliament, Captain H.H. Balfour, arranged another interview with the Home Office, also persuaded the Lord Privy and Sir John Anderson to agree to principle with the proposals. On the 20th of March 1939, a letter was received from the Air Raid Precautions Department of the Home Office, giving the town permission to build the tunnels. Thanks to the determined efforts of the Borough Council and the contrary to government policy, Ramsgate was to have its own underground city, which was to become the most extensive underground public shelter system in the country, if not the world. August the 24th, 1940 was Ramsgate's worst day of the war. Described at the time as the world's worst assault from the air, Ramsgate received more than 500 bombs from a squadron of German aircraft approaching Manston, and 1,200 houses were destroyed or damaged. Allegedly, the leading aircraft was shot down over the harbour, and in vengeance, the Germans decided to release their bombs over Ramsgate. Remarkably, only 29 civilians and 2 soldiers were killed. 10 were seriously injured and 49 slightly hurt. On the fateful occasion, countless lives were saved by the deep shelter system, conceived and implemented by the careful planning, forethought and persistence of the borough engineer R.D. Brimmel, his many assistants and the mayor A.B.C. Kempe. 1945, war comes to an end, with victory in Europe, and a few weeks later in Japan, Ramsgate's ARP tunnels that had saved so many lives were slowly sealed and abandoned. The railway tunnel was cleared and the scenic railway began to run again in 1946. In 1947, Ramsgate Borough Council started planning to reuse the tunnel section from Ellington Road to the harbour as a route for Newington Trunk Sewer. The pipe is still in use today and blocks most of the Ellington Road section. As you can see, as we take a walk along the tunnel, they've actually made up some bunk stroke cots. These were allocated to individuals. They had a number which corresponded with the bunk, so during the entirety of the war they could come back, have a night's sleep, a peaceful night's sleep, and would always know that that cot was allocated to them and their family. Also, as we go down the tunnel, there's little enclaves with chemical toilets in, which weren't obviously too nice during the war. But an interesting fact is there was a couple of chaps from Margate that used to come in daily and actually clean out these and take them away. They did that for many years. Eventually they started charging Ramsgate Council for the service. Nobody knows why they did it for so long free of charge, but that's an interesting fact anyway. It is well known that history repeats itself, and preparations for wars are no exception. The Cold War can trace its beginnings back to 1945, when the Big Three of Stalin, Roosevelt and Churchill met at Yalta to discuss re-establishment of the nations of war-torn Europe. As a result of this meeting, Eastern Europe came under the control of Stalin's Soviet Union. In 1946, Stalin gave a speech declaring that communism and capitalism were incompatible, and Winston Churchill gave a speech in which he declared an Iron Curtain had descended across Europe. In 1949, Russia tested its first atomic bomb, and in 1950, President Truman approved development of the H-bomb. By 1952, Britain was developing atom bombs. The Cold War was well underway. As in World War II, the British authorities became concerned about the escalating situation and plans were drawn up to protect the public. Little was known about Ramsgate plans until the confidential government records were opened in 2008 again. Ramsgate's borough engineer Mr. R.D. Brimmel was ahead of the game, and in January 1951 he produced a plan to reopen and reinforce the existing ARP tunnel system from World War II. In addition to this plan, he developed to construct new tunnels with access points covering the expanding town. The plan was divided into 3 schemes. Scheme 1 was to widen the Ellington Road section of the existing ARP system, which was partly blocked by the Newington trunk sewer. The scheme would serve 2,860 houses, 10,000 people, and would include 1,500 yards of tunnels. The cost was estimated at $16,500. Included in this figure was a cost to reopening the remainder of the existing network. Scheme 2 was for a new 700-yard tunnel to be dug under London Road and Peckwell Road to Nethercourt, with an entrance at each end. This would serve 1,150 houses, 4,010 people, at an estimated cost of $15,500. Scheme 3 was to serve the Newington area and was by far the most ambitious. The tunnel was to start under the northern end of Princess Margaret Avenue and continue to southern end, following Boundary and Newington Estate to Cheriton Avenue, along Cheriton Avenue to Newington Road. The tunnel would be 2,850 yards long, 1.62 miles, and would serve 2,830 houses, 10,250 people, with a total estimated cost at $52,500. These plans were never adopted, but the paperwork remained top secret until released by the National Archives in 2008. Presumably this was to protect public morale. Following an incident in 1965 when a train overran the track at the seafront terminal, it was decided to close the tunnel railway as it had become known. The line finally closed at the end of the summer season. The track was removed and the tunnel once again became abandoned. A study was carried out in 1988 to assess the feasibility of reusing the tunnels as a tourist attraction, to be known as the Ramsgate Blitz experience. Central to the attraction was the projection of taking famous faces on static mannequins. The proposal was open to the first phase of the attraction for the 50th anniversary of the commencement of World War II. The second phase was to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the Dunkirk evacuation. The proposals didn't materialise. In 1996, a survey was carried out of the Cannon Road and Railway Tunnel sections of the system to assess the requirements for allowing limited public access to those sections of the tunnels. No major problems were discovered and recommendations were made for minor work to remove safety hazards. In 2011, the Mayor of Ramsgate, David Green, formed the Ramsgate Tunnels Heritage Group to assess the viability of reopening the tunnels as an all-weather heritage attraction and to record the living memories of those who used the tunnels during World War II. As we exit the tunnels, we come into the main railway line tunnel, if you like, and what we see down here is an interpretation of where people stayed during the war. People actually lived in the tunnels permanently. If the houses were destroyed during the bombings, they had a tent, makeshift place put in the tunnels. Even a name and an address was put on each of the the small homes there, and so the post office knew exactly where to deliver the mail to. They also held dances regularly in the tunnels. Apparently the council got sick of the noise, etc., so they actually set a limit. Tuesdays and Thursday nights they could have the dances. I think it was from 6 till 9 p.m. or something like that. So it was interesting times in the tunnels, and they all lived there as a community, and people outside always knew who was living in the tunnels because they smelt so bad. Apparently obviously didn't have shower bathing facilities underground. I really enjoyed my walk around of the Ramsgate Tunnels today, and I hope you did too. I did my best to give you as much information on the history of the tunnels as possible, so please come and visit when you're in Ramsgate. It's definitely worth a few hours of your time. I want to thank you again for joining me today. Please subscribe, like and comment, and I hope to see you again on the next one. Have a lovely day. Goodbye.